As a quick little preface to this video, the main things we'll be going over is the stuck ISO and ASA dials, the mirror and shutter not functioning at the same time, slight mechanical issues with the aperture button, and issues with the self-timer. It's important to note that before you do any repairs, please make sure that there is no film in your camera. You can easily check by looking up here. If it is at 0 or you know that there is no film in there, you are perfectly fine. If there is film in there and it's half shot, you can rewind it by clicking the bottom button right here and then spinning this in the correct direction of the arrow. If there is film that is fully shot, do the same thing. With the half-shot film, however, make sure to mark how many exposures you did, and once you're ready to shoot that roll again, make sure that the front of this lens is entirely black by doing something like putting a cap on it, and shoot and wind up to the exposures that you have. I recommend simply priming the shutter and advancing it, and just advance it up until you get to the number you were previously at. So, a couple of quick things to go over. The K2 is in the same K line as one of the most popular film cameras ever, the Pentax K1000. This is an upgraded chassis, but that also means they come with some issues due to their advancements. The shutter is fully electric, but it does have a backup mechanical shutter, and there is multiple bells and whistles that, though very neat, can go wrong. Let me show you a couple of those fixes first. Firstly, this is an aperture button. It shows you the true exposure and knocks down your aperture. If this is stuck or jamming, let me show you what to do. Once you remove the lens, you'll notice a lever right here. This is what controls the aperture on the back of your camera. By clicking this button, the lever moves. If that is stuck, it just needs some basic cleaning and lubrication. I recommend a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and practically any kind of lubricant. I would recommend something made for brass, though. Nextly, while we're here with the lens off, let's talk about these dials. One of these is an ASA dial. That is basically the old version of exposure compensation. Then, the bottom dial is your ISO. I hear the Pentax K2s get a lot of backlash for this, but I really don't see an issue with them. Let's go over a basic rundown of them. This is clickable, so what you'll do is move it and adjust your exposure multiplication. This is your ISO. What you do is you press down a button right here and then spin the wheel independently. It should glide smoothly. That is how you set your ISO, unlike most cameras in which it's at the shutter or winder. Now, to fix this, all you're going to need to do is remove these screws, take out a couple of leaf springs, and clean and lubricate. There is a specific video to that I will link in the description. Big shout out to the guy who made it. I'll put up his name right now as well. Nextly, this winder is practically irreparable if you are trying to do it yourself. It requires a lot of specialized tools, and it has many very tiny gears that get messed up easily due to the softness of the metal they were made of. If it doesn't work properly, I honestly would recommend you to just not use it and use a shutter release cable. If it's something you need extremely bad, please contact a professional and actually get it repaired by them. I like tinkering with stuff, but even that is a little far, as you need to remove the whole front skin. Nextly, let's talk about the base plate and your shutter not firing correctly. This is your base plate. If your shutter is not firing properly or seems to be going too fast or too slow based upon your shutter speed, it may be due to the battery not having enough charge. This is a simple quarter screw battery that you can unscrew with your fingernails or a screwdriver if you prefer. It takes two LR44 batteries or two SR44s, I believe they're called. These are LR44s, as you can see by the text on them. If your charge is depleted, your shutter speed will go to either 125th of a second, or it will go to bulb mode depending on where you've set your shutter needle. So, if your batteries are dead, simply replace them by taking them out and putting the positive up. Then you can screw it straight back in. This also affects your light meter. If your light meter is not reading properly or at all, it's likely due to low batteries. I would say that this is the majority of the cause that I see from a lot of Reddit threads and videos asking for help. Now, the second most common shutter issue I see is the mirror lifting, yet the shutter not firing. And as I'll show you, that's actually an issue with your base plate. So, I'll induce it here instead of over-tightening my base plate and risking damage. I wind the lever, but there is too much pressure right here on the base plate for it to fire proper. The mirror lifts up, yet the shutter is still not firing. Now, if I let go of this, it fires perfectly fine. So, let's look in here and diagnose your issue. Now that we have repaired it, when you go to wind your shutter, this will pull forward and then back, priming your shutter lever. So, let's see that in action. Now, the shutter is primed as evident by this needle. When I fire, it falls straight down, activating the shutter. That's what you want to see. But what happens when your base plate's too tight or the needle isn't lubricated properly is you'll see it catch, causing the mirror to open but the shutter to stay down. Now, all that we need to do to fix this typically is to loosen our base plate. However, if you fire it and it seems to get stuck middle of the way, you need to tear down some and lubricate it, or take a syringe practically and lubricate it that way. Nextly, there is a battery compartment here. This is replaceable with a little bit of soldering and so. I would highly recommend replacing that if your batteries seem to not work even though you know they're fully charged. It's likely the battery receiver having gone dead. And that's really all you need to know for the base plate for your basic shutter issues. Otherwise, this is your electronic components. This is practically all mechanical components, only made for your shutter to be primed and shot. There is a lot that goes into making this. It's built like a clock, but the majority of the time, it's a very simple solution to your issues. Now that we have diagnosed the issue, let's go over how to reassemble the base plate simply. Firstly, while reassembling, you don't want your reverse button to be depressed. So, all you need to do for that is to wind the shutter. Secondly, you want the shutter to be released once you're putting the plate on. So, all we're going to do is wind it. You'll see your rewind button pop up and the shutter lever go up. Fire the shutter. And now that there is no issues, all we need to do is reassemble. Make sure to line up your battery plate with the battery slot, and make sure not to bump the reverse button while reassembling. It may need to be nudged into place. And bang, there we have it. Now, all you're going to do is screw in 3 screws along the base plate. Yet, you do need to stay careful about the middle piece. The shortest screw goes in the middle. If it goes anywhere else, you ruin the chance of the shutter working properly until you fix it. Now, while making sure that this is not fully tight while you apply the other screws, it is important to keep in mind that if you're tightening the base plate at all, to not over tighten as to strip the screws or trap the shutter. The over tightening of the base plate is the most common reason for your shutter not wanting to fire right next to your batteries. So, please be careful while doing this, and let me just show you what over tightening would look like. If you're going as far as you possibly can with the screws, it's likely your shutter won't fire properly. See that? That is what will happen if your screws are over tightened on the base. The screw I recommend loosening up the first is this screw here. And now, with less than a quarter turn, it should fire completely fine. And once you've reinserted your battery, everything should work fine. Now, the most obvious issues you'll have is when you're loading your film, and there's an issue in that process, and when you're going to shoot film and seeing an issue through your eyepiece. Firstly, let's discuss about the eyepiece. However, I don't have the lens to see through it. So, what you should see is a split diopter, I believe it's called, which splits your image and recombines it once you're in focus. That's pretty simple to learn. I'd highly recommend just looking at the K2 owner manual for that. There also is little grain pieces around that split which show if the surrounding area is in focus. I recommend looking at the manual for that as well. If you see black spots or any kind of grime looking thing, it's likely scratches or mold on your mirrors. There is some things you can do about mold, especially if it's on the first frontal mirror right here or the mirror right here. However, if it gets into this eyepiece, it is very difficult to remove. It's very common for scratches and dust to build up on the mirror. I recommend simply polishing it with a lens cloth. However, that will hardly ever get rid of the full issue. One good thing to note, though, is that that will not end up on your final image due to the mirror lifting itself when you take a photo. One thing I do recommend checking, though, is winding your shutter while going into bulb mode. What bulb mode does is it exposes for as long as you hold down this shutter. Now hold it down and make sure you can see the back, which is where the film is. Now, if you see any dust in this lower area, I would recommend pumping it out with a air tool, like the air rockets that everyone seems to be using. That is really it for the grime you'll see. But nextly is your shutter and your back. So, here's how to open your back. Firstly, you're going to want to check the top for what your film meter says. If you have no film in the camera and you know it, you don't really need to do this step. However, if you have film in the camera, first you'll want to click this button, which is the rewind button, and you'll want to pull this lever up and spin until there is no resistance and you hear a click. That is quite simple, but it's always important to note that you can expose the film on accident if you lift it while film is in the camera. Now let's actually look at it. you'll lift this piece and it will open your back plate. Here is your shutter. When you wind the shutter, you should see it go up, and no pieces should be poking out. Let's see. And that's perfect. That winded perfectly. This lever advances your shutter, but also advances the film, so it's ready to take another shot. Let's see. And it winded it perfectly. Now, when you click this top button, it will expose your film by lifting the shutter, as I've shown before. If you can see directly through the camera, that is a good sign. That means that there should be no issues other than your lens. Now, this is where you load the film. It stretches across, and you wind it into here. If there is an issue with this shutter, this back plate, or this advancing, you need to get it repaired. Firstly, you can start with the advance lever by taking the top off and looking at some tutorials as to how to make this spin properly. Once again, it's probably a lubrication issue. These cameras are nearly fully mechanical, other than the shutter in this case, and it can be very difficult to repair them, or very simple, depending on how far you're willing to go. And that is really it for the back, but this advancer can be an issue. Not only does it rewind your film, but opens your door. If you can't get the door to open, this piece is likely broken in some way. Sometimes the metal here will get bent and won't rewind or open properly, and sometimes the top is broken and isn't fully connected, causing you to not have any force on it. You can buy or 3D print this part, specifically for the K2. The K1000s, especially the newer models of K1000s, have the wrong needle for this. Do not use the wrong needle. I highly recommend looking on eBay for a 10 to 20 buck listing of this exactly. To repair it, all you need to do is lift the top, and there are two very tiny screws you won't be able to see. That black dot is one screw, and on the other side is the same. You'll need to unscrew those. I recommend a pivoting screwdriver or ratchet. Alright, and finally let's go over the top area and some issues you might have while using it and how to use it. So, if you're going normally into a shoot, what you'll need to do is halfway hold down your shutter, and that will tell your light meter to line up and tell you what exposure to do. The black needle needs to line up with the blue needle. The blue needle is your set shutter speed, and the black needle is the recommended. You also can adjust the aperture to change your exposure up here. Once that is lined up, you will have or need to wind this, and then hold it down, double check your exposure, and fire. Now, if something went wrong in that section, it's likely this, or your advance. This has a lock on it at the top. If I go to press it like this, it won't go all the way down, but if it's switched to the right, it goes all the way down.